What are common HR generalist behavioral interview questions, and how do you answer them? Hey there, my name is Josh, and I'm the founder of HR University. Before we start exploring these interview questions, make sure to subscribe to our channel, and that way you don't miss any of our future lessons on how to become a great HR professional. Now let's go ahead and begin. For an HR generalist interview, recruiters ask questions that revolve around the candidate's future career to know their long-term goals and about HR skills to test their basic HR knowledge. Moreover, they ask them questions related to an HR generalist role to judge technical skills associated with the role. And they also present questions about administrative skills to understand if the candidate has the right digital and hard skills needed to successfully carry out the role. And last but not least here, interviewers ask management and situational questions to understand about a candidate's behavior towards a possible tough situation and environment to see how they will respond in a certain scenario. And in this lesson, we'll learn in detail about the behavioral questions asked in an HR generalist interview. And we'll cover up the rest of the topics in other lessons. And we'll start with the list of HR generalist behavioral interview questions related to HR management. The most common questions are, describe a situation when you had clashes with a coworker. And how would you handle an underperforming employee? How would you create and implement new HR policies? And how would you improve the recruitment process? And how do you keep accurate records? And how do you manage harassment claims? Now let's go through these questions one by one. The first question on our list is, describe a situation when you had clashes with a coworker. Interviewers want to know how candidates react under pressure, and this is a great question to find just that out. And they want to know if you can manage conflict and handle situations well. It also offers employers insight into your negotiation and problem-solving skills and abilities. Clashes and disagreements are quite common in any workplace, and the candidates for the HR generalist position must be capable of managing such situations. When answering this question, explain how you handled the situation, what the outcome was. Mention the steps you took to resolve the conflict. And the second question is, how would you handle an underperforming employee? The candidate's ability to assess employees' performance and give feedback is crucial for the HR generalist role. An organization needs someone who can work with employees and improve their performance. When answering the question, tell the interviewer how you identified the problem and what steps you took to help that employee improve. A candidate should know how to speak to underperforming employees and help them understand where they're lacking. In addition, you can also review their work and offer suggestions on how to improve. Moreover, it's also essential to set expectations with employees and help them create a plan to reach their goals. And the third question on our list is, how would you create and implement new HR policies? Your answer shows the interviewers that your competency in policy development aligns with the organization and company's goals. Talk about your experience creating HR policies while answering this question, and give a specific example of an HR policy as well. And finally, explain the process and the outcome of the policy. In addition, mention the challenges you face while developing and implementing that said policy. Another question is, how would you improve the recruitment process of an organization? An HR generalist must understand the recruitment process, its challenges, and ways to improve it. And here, give a specific example of how you improve the recruitment process, explain the steps you took to improve the process and how you prioritize those steps, and that way you ensured great candidate quality. Moreover, talk about the use of technology in recruitment and suggest using applicant tracking systems to help the recruitment process. Furthermore, talk about using social media and job boards for recruitment, as it shows that you are familiar with the latest recruitment trends. And the next question is, talk about a time when you had to keep accurate records in your previous job. This question is essential for HR generalists because it helps employers to identify if the candidate has organizational and administrative skills. To answer it, describe a situation where you had to keep accurate records and detail the steps you took. Also, mention any challenges you face and how you overcame them. Organizations need to manage several employee issues. And our next question lets interviewers know if you have experience dealing with harassment claims, which is one of those employee issues. It also shows if you are familiar with investigating and resolving such claims. When answering the question, give an example of handling harassment complaints. Explain how the employee approached you and how you investigated that claim. In addition, mention the investigation outcome and your action against the perpetrator. If some of this information can't be disclosed, also be careful to note that, and you can use, instead of fake names, instead of the actual names of the people involved. Now let's move on to questions related to HR analytics. Questions that you can expect are, what's your experience creating reports on employee performance? How would you use analytical skills to make decisions? Describe an experience with HR data to improve employee engagement. How would you use data analytics to identify training needs? And what are your thoughts on using data to assess employee retention risk? And how would you use HR data to improve the recruiting process? And the most common question we'll start with is, what's your experience creating reports on employee performance? And when answering this question, discuss your experience collecting data and creating reports on employee performance. To elaborate further, make sure to talk about report examples in detail and how they helped improve the employee performance and the results accordingly. In addition, mention the tools you use to collect data and create reports, as advanced analytical tools ensures accuracy. And it'll show you are familiar with the latest trends in HR analytics. Another major question the interviewer will ask is, how would you use analytical skills to make decisions? And when answering this question, provide examples of using analytics to make decisions to improve employee productivity. And if you don't have experience with productivity improvement, talk about a similar example. Also mention the data you use to make the decision. And finally, let's move on to the interview questions regarding interpersonal skills. The most common questions are, how would you encourage communication among team members? And how would you handle a conflict between two employees? And how do you build relationships with your team members? And also describe a time when you had to communicate a change in policy to your team members. And we'll start with the first one. How would you encourage communication among your team members? This question gauges a candidate's ability to build relationships and promote communication within the team. And when answering this question, discuss the importance of strong interpersonal skills in the workplace. In addition, give an example of when you promoted communication among your team members. And there we have it. We covered some of the most common HR generalist behavioral interview questions, as well as many of their answers. And we hope the questions help you nail your next interview. And don't forget to like this video and make sure to subscribe to our channel. That way you can keep up to date with all of our lessons on how to become a great HR professional and our many other lessons that we have covering interview questions. And again, my name is Josh. I'm the founder of HR University, and I'll go ahead and see you in some of our following lessons. Cheers.